So today at the Daybreak Star Radio, we bring you Sean Sherman, the Sioux chef. Right there, yeah.
Hi, yep. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you are a celebrated chef. You're an author. You're an owner of Minneapolis' hottest restaurant, probably as far as I'm concerned. So what else do you do? Tell the audience who you are and what you're up to.
Sure. My name is Sean Sherman. I was born and raised on Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. I am enrolled with the Oglala Lakota Sioux tribe. I live in Minneapolis. I started a company called the Sioux Chef, SIOUX, back in 2014 after quite a few years of researching. I also started a nonprofit called NATIVS, which is an acronym for North American Traditional Indigenous Food Systems, where we have a public nonprofit kitchen called Indigenous Food Lab that we're doing a lot of really amazing work with. And we opened up the restaurant Owamni in downtown Minneapolis last year in July of 21. And this year we won the James Beard Award for Best New Restaurant in the entire nation.
That is amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That is a lot of work, opening a kitchen.
Yeah, it's no joke.
and you opened it during a pandemic.
Yes, we did. And,
so
and trying to fund it during a pandemic too, on top of that.
Yeah, how did you do that? Did you get any grants? Did people help?
We just found in a really amazing organization that was kind of a social financing situation that really helped us get to the other side, and in a time where banks had completely frozen any support, especially for businesses like restaurants.
Yeah, well, good for you. Thank you for bringing your food to the masses. That's wonderful. So I also understand that you started cooking professionally really young. Like how? Why?
Well, my mom moved us off the reservation, my sister and I, when I was young, and just before high school. And I remember my first job was actually a paper route job in the northern Black Hills, and being a 12-year-old kid running through like 3 feet of snow with 30 pounds of papers on you was not a fun job. And then I was able to find a restaurant job at that same age. I started working in restaurants when I was 13, and it was better because it was warmer and there was food around me, so it was plus.
Yeah, I hear you. I started working at 14 as a seamstress at a dry cleaners.
Nice.
It was nice and warm in there in the winters for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. So how did you get into traditional cooking then? Or was that from your family? Or did you learn?
So for me, it was just a matter of after I moved to Minneapolis, I'd already been working in restaurants for quite a while, so I had a pretty good work ethic in the kitchen, and I just moved my way up rather quickly and became a very young chef in the city of Minneapolis in the early 2000s. And it was a few years into my chef career after I was able to learn a lot of different cuisines. I chefed at a Spanish restaurant, a French restaurant, lots of farm to table restaurants, Japanese restaurants. And I just became, really interested in food and history. And then one day I just realized the complete absence of Indigenous anything out there in the culinary world, including my own education. Like I knew very little about what my Lakota ancestors were actually eating. And it was, it seemed elusive, but it set me on a path to try and understand and figure out what were my ancestors growing? Were they harvesting things? Were they foraging? Was it plant knowledge? Were they trading with other groups? What did they use for salts or fats or sugars? I said all these questions from a culinary kind of perspective. And I spent quite a few years just researching and understanding to get to where I am now.
That's amazing. I actually think it's really amazing because so many natives and urban communities have lost that knowledge. And to know that you not only were able to go out and find it, but do all these things with it and then bring it back and start a foundation to help teach is pretty amazing. But for all of you out there listening, you can certainly learn. You can learn how to cook, and you can learn how to harvest, and you can learn how to forage and find the things that you need. Ask your elders. If you don't have any elders around, you can certainly grab Sean's book and learn some ways. And on that, what is one of your favorite things to harvest?
We're so seasonal, and I get to travel quite a bit. So it's really nice just to be in other regions and just get to see what's in season at that moment. So, if I'm in California, it's been great to be there for like acorn season or manzanita berries or whatever they might be, or, camas roots if you're like in the Great Basin, or wherever, or if the salmon's running or whatever fish is coming through. Where it just depends on where we are, you know. So I just think it's every few weeks is exciting during the growing season, you know, because in the Great Lakes, Minnesota, like it kicks off with maple and it just kind of slowly rolls all the way through until harvest season, which is about now, and everything's kind of being put away and getting ready for the next year. So it's exciting always.
Yeah. Do you have a foraging story that you could share with us?
I just love being outside, so I spend a ton of time outdoors when I can, and I always love connecting with the plants and the trees around us, and just exploring what's out there, you know, and just seeing all these different regions. So I feel very privileged. I've been able to travel across the nation, go to so many different tribal communities in so many different regions, and just experience all of that wonderful connection that we share as Indigenous peoples to the world around us.
That's, yeah, yeah. Well, so on a less positive note, as you know, and as you've talked about, destroying food culture and that connection to food really assists in creating an extinction plan for a culture. And you've had just years of study now of the biodiversity of North America and our food cultures. How do you feel that learning all this food knowledge, and from our cultural perspective, how do you think that has changed your perspective of the world? Or
Well, you know, we look at these Indigenous issues as a global situation. We look at, you know, identifying what is colonialism and what destruction did it do in its path, and what was the time frame of it. And really looking at the 1800s specifically, I think is a really important century to really pay attention to, especially in North America, where so many Indigenous peoples were completely displaced, so much land grabbing was going on. So much violence was happening at such an alarming rate with just no repercussions, you know. And I feel like if you look at the rest of the world, this was also happening in so many different nations everywhere, because it's in South America, Africa, India, Southeast Asia, Middle East, Australia, New Zealand, Hawaii, you name it. All of this just intense violence against Indigenous peoples, which follows with assimilation and segregation and racism. And we're still living in the confines of a lot of that. You know, if we look at reservation systems today, we're still basically, you know, constructed segregation systems. And we need to really think through what that means for us. But what we do have is some power to make some changes, especially as Indigenous communities across the United States, because we can start to rewrite some of our own laws in our favor and some of our own food laws in our favor, to really bring back a sense of culture by just reconnecting ourselves to knowledge and food of our ancestors.
yeah, I agree. Perfectly stated. You've clearly answered the question before. Thank you very much. So one thing that we've discovered, we have a food program to feed our elders and things at United Indians, and sometimes it's expensive, especially if we're trying to feed a lot of people. Do you have any, I guess, advice on how urban natives could either learn together and forage, or to get products in a way to cook more native foods, or to incorporate it more into their diet?
Well, I mean, it's an education issue, and it's an food access issue, and it's something that we're trying to tackle with our nonprofit. So through natives, or through the Indigenous Food Lab specifically in Minneapolis, you know, we're releasing a native market space in Minneapolis. So there'll be a place for our community to come and find a place to purchase these Indigenous ingredients that we curate, and help just bring together for retail stuff. And then we're also opening up a community classroom where we can teach a lot of Indigenous focused education on basically everything, whether it's crafting, sewing, cooking, food preservation, gardening, farming, foraging, language, whatever the topic might be. We're creating a place to be able to do that and record everything so we can keep it digitally and share it with everybody through our website, and just making everything open access. And our goal is to replicate this food lab and move it all over the place. So right now we're actively working towards Anchorage, Alaska, Bozeman, Montana, Rapid City, South Dakota. And we're going to continue to move everywhere we absolutely can, because we see the need for creating support systems out there everywhere, and just giving people the resources that they need to be able to access these foods, to learn about these foods, and just help steward it for future generations.
Yeah, it is so important with the extraordinarily high rates of diabetes and heart disease and kidney failure in our communities. There's food is really the medicine.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So on that, what do you cook at home?
I love cooking, so I love cooking at home. I love just whatever's fresh. I love just I feel like in Minneapolis we're kind of lucky because we have these really wonderful co-ops. So there's just lots of local food, and everything's just so seasonal. So it's just really fun to cook with the seasons, but also just on whims. Like, and then this year I have a fireplace at my house, and I set up a system where I can do some cooking, so I can have a big pot of soup or stew or something going right over the fire. And I'm looking forward to spending the winter experimenting with that.
Nice. That's great. I love cooking squash over fire in particular.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so good. Okay, so what advice would you give to Native youth who want to get into the restaurant industry or to be a chef?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of resources out there for learning how to cook, but we really need to start focusing on our perspective as Indigenous peoples and what that means in the culinary world. So I feel really lucky that we were able to get to a point where we do have a restaurant where we can bring in a new generation of chefs and leaders to learn so that they can go on and do this themselves, and creating a system of education where we can bring people in. So I would say people are always welcome to reach out to us as we develop systems to train and develop and even hire people moving forward, and just becoming a support center to help develop more leaders and entrepreneurs and restaurateurs for the next generations.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your time today. Everybody, you can see Sean Sherman and get a copy of his book at the Seattle Public Library on November 4th. We will put all the information in the notes. Mishnewe.
All right. Ilamae.